Okay, I have quite the leaning tower of books here, which I'll get to in a second. It has been a hot minute. I have been out of town for basically an entire month. I don't even really know where to start, but basically I was in South Korea and Japan traveling with my boyfriend and my brother. My brother lives in Korea. And literally the day after I got back to the States, I had to go to Boston for a work conference. Both experiences were so incredible. Traveling is such a joy and such a privilege, but I'm also kind of an introverted homebody, so I missed a lot of my creature comforts. I missed my own bed and my routines, and especially my cats. So as great as all of it was, I am very excited to be back. Also, forgive the voice. I feel like I might sound a little bad because I feel like I might have a bit of a cold. Of course, with all this traveling and just being at a work conference with tons of people, I shouldn't really be surprised, but I'm definitely annoyed. I'm not like sick, I just feel a little bit under the weather, so it is kind of the perfect weekend to just have some cozy at-home time to read, to start a new puzzle, to do some gaming. That is all I want to do. While I was in Korea and Japan, I basically just read romances and horror novels because I find those are really easy and entertaining to read when you're traveling all day and you don't really have a lot of energy to focus on reading. And while I love both of those genres, fantasy is definitely my bread and butter, so I am ready to tackle some of these fantasy books. Starting with the book I'm in the middle of, and I actually was in the middle of it when I left for Korea. It was so hard leaving this about 50% through, but I didn't want to bring a book that was halfway done all the way across the world with me. Oh, and this is Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross, which is the sequel and finale to Divine Rivals. Luckily though, I'm not one who tends to forget much about what I was reading, so I've been able to dive back in easily, and I'm still just as enamored and sucked in as I was before. I think I have not even 200 pages left, so this is the first book I really want to finish this weekend. The first book, Divine Rivals, is a YA novel following Roman and Iris. Both of them are journalists, and they're sort of in a competition with each other to see who gets hired at this local paper. However, there is a war between two gods stirring in their country, and that changes everything. The first book was definitely a little bit light on the fantasy elements. It was a bit more of a romance, which was so cute and so beautiful, but I am glad to say that in the second book, Ruthless Vows, we are getting some more fantasy world building. And I really do need to read this because it's just been announced that Rebecca Ross is releasing another book in this world, I think later this year. So, number 1 on the docket. Number 2 is the book I did bring with me, and this is also unfinished. And I'm actually a little sad because this copy got kind of beat up in my backpack while I was traveling, but I'm 150 pages in exactly and really enjoying it. This is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, and it's set in a fantasy world, kind of like Attack on Titan, if you've ever seen that, where the people of this country live behind these concentric walls. The walls protect them from these powerful sea creatures called leviathans. And our main character is an assistant to an investigator in a Sherlock Holmes-Watson kind of duo. And in the beginning of the book, they are assigned to investigate the brutal murder of this imperial officer. Basically, a giant tree magically exploded from within his body, which actually sounds like one of the worst ways to die. So there's magic, there's mystery, 2 of my favorite things, and so far I'm really loving it. So I definitely want to get through these 2 books first. But then I have a whole stack of books I could move on to. And this is actually a little bit of a book haul. So right before we left, I got these 2 books, which would be the new Fourth Wing book, Onyx Storm. This is the 3rd book in the Fourth Wing series, and I mean, it's so pretty. I actually don't think this series is all that well written, to be honest, but I love dragons and I have a lot of fun with it. So I definitely want to read this one soon. I also got Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This book came out, I don't even know, probably 10 years ago at this point. And I've had it on my TBR since then. It sounds right up my alley. I just haven't picked it up until now. This is about a librarian who has been obsessed with this legend of this lost mythical city of Weep. and I think he ends up going on this adventure to it, finding out that it's real and there are, I don't know, gods and monsters and all kinds of mythical creatures. This just sounds like the perfect kind of book to me. I love books that follow people who love books, like The Starless Sea, for example, and everyone talks about how kind of flowery Laini Taylor's writing style is, and personally, I really enjoy that. I know some people don't, but it's my cup of tea. And then I went to the bookstore yesterday to get the new Emily Wilde book. This is the third and I think final one in this series. This came out while I was abroad, and I was so sad because I definitely wanted to read it right away. It was just really bad timing. But this is Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales. Actually, I ended up getting a signed copy, which is so much fun. I mean, how exciting is that? This is one of my favorite series, and I have so much hope for this book. In the first book, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, we follow Emily Wilde, of course, who is a scholar of like fairies and the fairy world. She travels to this island to study their fae, and she ends up being followed by her frenemy / co-worker Wendell. Of course, there's a little bit of a romance there, but I really enjoy these because they're cozy, they're fun, but they really stick to true fairy tale themes. I'm talking creepy, backwards, Holly Jackson, grim fairy tale kind of fairies, not the hot, sexy Sarah J. Maas kind. Which honestly is my preference, so I'm so ready to dive back into this world. Then I got the new Cassandra Clare book, which is The Rag Picker King. Actually, both of these were signed copies, which is so exciting, and this one came with a bookmark and a pin, which is super fun. But this is the second book in her Swordcatcher series, the first one being Swordcatcher. I haven't read it yet. I do plan on reading it soon, but my boyfriend just read it, so I decided to get him this since it just came out. And this also has the most stunning naked cover. Like, look at that. So yeah, those are my reading plans for the weekend. And I also want to do a few things like start a new puzzle, order some yarn, and I really need to paint my nails today. So I want to get that done, and I also promised my boyfriend, oh my god, okay, my fiance, that I would make him a lemon loaf cake, which is also one of my personal favorites, so I'm gonna do that probably tomorrow or maybe Sunday. Okay, I've been yammering on enough. Let's just get into it. Well, hi. It's been 2 seconds for you, but for me, it's been a few days. And I think you can tell from my voice, it's because I've been sick. It was not just a little cold, it was a full-blown virus. I'm not 100% yet. Obviously, I'm still really congested and coughing, but I feel a lot better and my fever is gone. I should have expected it after being in a city at a big conference where people were traveling in, but I was just really hoping I wasn't going to catch conference crud. Unfortunately, I don't have that kind of good luck, so I've spent the last few days in my PJs, laying in bed, feeling sorry for myself. I didn't do a lot of reading because when I'm sick like that, I find I can't really concentrate very much on reading. I did, however, watch every single episode of The Pitt that is out. I wasn't going to start that show. It's a new medical one. And I feel like that genre is obviously really oversaturated, but then I kept hearing how good it was and how realistic, so I started it and just really liked it, watched everything that was already out. I'm not a doctor or a nurse, obviously, so I can't really say on my own if it's accurate, but it seems more realistic than other medical shows. I also watched Longlegs last night with my boyfriend, and I don't know, I'm kind of, I don't want to say disappointed, but I did think it was going to be a bit scarier than it was. To be fair, I'm kind of desensitized. I've seen a lot of horror movies. It's one of my favorite genres, but just based on the trailer and, you know, all of the response from last summer when it came out, I thought I was going to be a lot more impressed by how Nicolas Cage or Longlegs looked. And while it was creepy and I loved the way it was shot and the storyline and the tension, I wasn't as scared as I thought I was going to be. But I still liked it. I would still recommend it. And I've, of course, played a lot of Hello Kitty Island Adventure. I've unlocked another section of Merry Meadows and also Icy Peak finally, so it's been a good time. There's really nothing better to do when you're sick but just play video games. I did read 40 or 50 pages of Ruthless Vows, so I don't really have much of an update. But right now, I want to go make some tea and actually get some reading done now that I feel a bit more, like, mentally present. few days, and honestly it's been a supremely shitty week, which is why I haven't updated. But I'll get to that in a second. I do want to now update on Ruthless Vows because I finished it. I just sat down the other night and blew through the ending of this book. Unfortunately though, I think I'm only going to give this a generous 3.5 out of 5 stars. I wanted to love this more than I actually ended up loving it. I don't dislike this book like so many other people do, but there's definitely some flaws within this duology that I was actually pretty surprised by because Rebecca Ross's other series, The Elements of Cadence, is pretty much perfect in my opinion. Whereas Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows, I really feel are lacking in some major ways. So honestly, that's why I'm kind of surprised that this is the duology by Rebecca Ross that has gone viral, when Elements of Cadence is literally right there. Not to say that this is bad, it isn't. I would still recommend it. I really enjoyed my experience reading it because for both of the books in this duology, I love the characters, I love the writing style and the atmosphere. It's just not perfect. I think a lot of people were obsessed with the first book because it really centers on the romance between Roman and Iris. And I really liked the romance, but I felt like the world building was lacking, and the romance, while cute, was definitely very rushed in my opinion. I know there's a war going on, but they're so young, they're like 18, 19 years old, and I just thought it all happened a little bit quickly. And I think a lot of people were disappointed in Ruthless Vows because it centers a lot more on the actual plot, action, and world building instead of romance. And if that's what you loved about the first book, I could definitely see why you were disappointed in this one. But for me, I was just glad to get a lot more info on the war and the gods and their motivations. However, there are still some things I wasn't really happy with. I still really liked the characters, but the ending, it was just really sudden and way too easy in my opinion. So the payoff, it just didn't feel quite as emotional or rewarding as I think Rebecca Ross intended it to be. Honestly, there's a bit of a deus ex machina at the ending, and I can't say anything about that without spoiling it, but I'll just say that things wrapped up a little too neatly in a way that I just didn't think was all that believable. And while we do get a lot more information about the gods, Dacre, who is essentially the big #1 enemy evil villain in this world and in this series, I just didn't really buy him as a villain. He just felt like some guy, to be honest, like some jealous ex, and I never really felt, I think, as big of a threat from him as Rebecca Ross intended. You know, one of Rebecca Ross's strong suits in her other series, Elements of Cadence, is her characters. She really fleshes all of them out. That was Mabel. And this includes side characters, not just the main characters. But in this series, I kind of felt like the side characters were just there. I liked them, and they had some defining characteristics, but they were pretty flat beyond that, and I really wanted more from them. Roman and Iris are great, and they're there, but for some of these emotional punches to really hit and land, I think we needed more from the side characters. I feel like that's my verdict on this entire series. I just wanted more from everything. More from the characterizations, more from the world building and the gods. I wanted Rebecca Ross to like push it further and bigger and deeper, and I just feel like we never really got there. So I know it sounds like I'm complaining a lot, but I will say, again, I love the writing style, the atmosphere. I would definitely reread these books. They just aren't perfect, and honestly I was expecting a little bit more because I do love her other series so much. And if you haven't read The Elements of Cadence, which is A River Enchanted and A Fire Endless, please do, because oh my god, those books are so good. But yeah, that is Ruthless Vows, and I'm currently reading The Tainted Cup, which I actually need to go get. Okay, I just pulled this out of my work bag. I'm like 50% of the way through it now. I already talked about the premise before, but yeah, basically this is a fantasy world, but we're also following a murder investigation. I really like this. I think the mystery and the fantastical elements are balanced really well because they're essentially intertwined for the entire plot so far. I really love the contrast between our investigator and then our main character, who's her assistant, because he's sort of just very normal, quiet, serious, you know, sort of puts his head down and just gets the job done. Whereas Anna, who's the investigator, she is very, you know, eccentric and odd, and, you know, it is, again, very like Sherlock Watson style duo. which has always been a win for me. I love Sherlock Holmes and basically every iteration of it. So this is definitely doing it for me. I have a lot of questions and a lot of curiosities, and I have literally nothing negative to say. I'm hoping that the ending of this lives up to the hype because I've heard so many good things about this book. It was a lot of people's favorite from last year. I think the second one is already out. I think. I might be wrong about that though, which would be great. Although I am now on a book buying ban, which I'll get to again in a second, so I'd probably have to get that from the library. And speaking of, I went to the library today and I picked up 3 books. I meant to get 2, but I just couldn't resist. So first is The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager, which I was supposed to read for a book club meeting last week, and then I got sick, so I didn't go. And you know what? That's fine because the hold literally didn't even become available until like 2 days after the book club met. Obviously though, I'm still going to read it and talk to them about it. They're my friends. And I've read a few Riley Sager books so far. I read like 3 in December. I didn't love any of them. I liked some of them. Didn't like some others. So we'll see. We'll see what this one has in store for me. Next I got Binti, which is actually just a little short novella, and it's a sci-fi. That's basically all I know. I need to read this for my other book club that's meeting later this week. This should be quick and easy. I'm really excited to give that a shot. And then I picked up another Darcy Coates book. This is The Haunting of Lee Parker. I've read almost every book by Darcy Coates. I think she just does a really solid, spooky, haunted house story. Some of them are better than others. We'll see how this one fares, but I think this is actually about a house that was a normal house and then suddenly overnight is haunted, and I'm definitely very interested in that. I love a ghost story. Like, that's my favorite horror trope. So this is the one I wasn't planning on getting, but you know what? They're quick reads, and I always have a fun time reading those. Okay, that's a lot of book news. Life news. This week really sucked. There's no sugar coating it. Basically, my fiance, oh my god, my fiance. I really need to get used to that. We moved up to New England from Virginia after college for jobs, and we both worked for the same company, and I say worked because this week my boyfriend went in and he, alongside a bunch of other people, were suddenly laid off with no warning. I was crying at work, which I never want to do again. And I'm also worried because in the US, your insurance and your healthcare is all tied to your job. So we have to figure out what he's gonna do about that, what we're gonna do. It's just really bad timing. Not that there's a good time to get laid off, but we literally just spent all this money going on this big trip, and we got engaged during this trip, and like 3 weeks later he gets laid off. So yeah, obviously a really rough week. So yeah, that's my depressing update. Very unexpected, but that's the state of this country right now, to be frank. Okie dokie, I'm about to put a lemon pound cake in the oven, and I'm really hoping it turns out well. I bake a lot, cakes, macarons, all sorts of things, but I've actually never done pound cake for whatever reason, despite how easy it is. So I'm trying out this recipe, and I'm hoping that it's decadent and moist and really delicious. Here she is, pre-baking, and I'll show you when she's done in about an hour. I don't know why she says she just is. While I'm waiting for the pound cake to be ready in the oven, I am going to read some of The Tainted Cup. The lemon pound cake is done and out of the oven, but now it has to cool for an hour before I make the simple syrup to put on top. I cannot even begin to describe how amazing this smells. Alrighty, the glaze is already on, and now I am putting on the frosting. Alrighty, it's been a few days and I have quite the reading update. I finished The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, and I started and then finished Binti by Nnedi Okorafor, which the glare on this with this shiny library cover is so bad. So this is a really short, like 100-page sci-fi novella. We follow a girl who's only like 15 or 16, I think, named Binti, of course. She grew up on Earth in a village community that never leaves their home. They really value the place that they live and the land there, which is why they actually cover their skin with a mixture of the red clay in the earth there and this oil from local flowers. However, Binti is highly intelligent and tenacious, and at the beginning of this novella, she is leaving her hometown and planet for the first time ever to attend this prestigious university. So she boards a spaceship there and ultimately ends up in between this centuries-long war and rivalry between two different alien species. Fun, it's action-packed, it's really quick, obviously, since it's under 100 pages. There are a lot of things I liked about this, especially Binti as our protagonist. Like I said, she's intelligent, but that doesn't mean that she's stoic or unfeeling, which is kind of a stereotype I'm a little bit over. No, Binti is like fully able to show and embrace her emotions, which I really appreciated. There's also a lot of rich culture in this book. Not only Binti's home culture, but some of the other cultures of the people around her are described as well. And I found all of that detail to be so fascinating. Okorafor is pretty light on the details when it comes to the sci-fi elements and how they function, which I'm kind of cool with. I'm cool with being just dropped in a world. But she spends a lot of time in this novella describing Binti and her heritage, which was one of my favorite things about this book. So like I said, yeah, there were a lot of things I liked about this. However, it wasn't a favorite. For me, because this book was so short, I kept wishing for just a little bit more. A lot of times we're just briefly mentioning things and, you know, skimming over them instead of really developing them. For example, Binti makes some friends on this spaceship and we literally just get like a list of their names a couple times and that's it. Which makes it kind of difficult to care about these other characters when we don't really know them at all. You know, there's a lot of content here. There's a lot that's mentioned, but because of its short nature, I felt like a lot of it was a bit underdeveloped. Also, my main complaint is that the ending of this book just felt way too convenient. Actually, everyone in my book club pretty much thought this. As much as we enjoyed the world and this like sci-fi epic, the ending left a lot to be desired. Everything just seemed a little too easy. I didn't necessarily buy that, you know, this conclusion would have ever been able to happen. Again, I can't say much more for sake of spoilers, but those are my thoughts on Binti. I liked it. I'm definitely gonna read the next two books in this series, but I definitely have some criticisms. Now for The Tainted Cup. I loved this book so much. I was thinking, you know, what rating to give it, and I'll admit I'm a little stingy with my 5-star ratings. Some of my favorite books I've ever read I didn't give a 5-star to. But I was thinking, why would I not give this book 5 stars? Because there's literally not a single thing in this that I disliked. Everything from the characters to the mystery to the fantasy and the world building, I really liked. As much as I am a big fantasy reader, I also love mysteries and thrillers. And for me, a good mystery lays out all the puzzle pieces, right? They're sort of all there in front of your face, but you're unable to connect them. So by the time you get to the reveal, or reveals in this case, you sort of have that moment of, oh my god, of course, how did I not see that? For me, that is what an effective mystery is, and that is what makes a reveal so sweet. It's not something just completely coming out of left field, but something that you can look back on and see the trail. But of course, you didn't really recognize that trail for what it was at the time. That is what I felt Robert Jackson Bennett did so well in this book. There was a lot going into this mystery, multiple deaths, political scheming, big fantastical elements, and I loved every second of it. Also, the world that this is in, I thought was really cool. Like I said, there are these seawalls and these giant leviathans that come rampage towards the land. Created a lot of tension for the characters not only be trying to solve this mystery, but to be worried about these leviathan coming towards them and crushing the entire town. And the people there actually use leviathan, I think it was blood, to create these grafts and alterations to themselves in order to have certain heightened abilities. Like, you know, heightened perfect memory, strength, speed, all sorts of really cool stuff. So yeah, I am actually giving this 5 out of 5 stars, which, is this my first one of the year? It might be, hold on. I mean, I gave 5 stars to The Unmaking of June Farrow, but that was a reread, so I kind of feel like that doesn't count. I've read some good stuff, but yeah, this was my first 5-star book of the year. Anyway, I think I'm gonna leave it here. That is my little reading vlog. We read Binti, The Tainted Cup, and of course, Ruthless Vows. I liked all of them, but the shining star was definitely The Tainted Cup. Oh, and I don't know if I got back to you, but I'm gonna link that lemon pound cake recipe below because it was absolutely divine. It was just the way pound cake should be. So perfect and slightly dense, but really moist and delicious. Also, it's really quick and easy, so I highly recommend it. But yeah, I would love to know if you've read any of the books I read in this video and what you thought about them, or what you're reading right now and if you would recommend that.